And it's interesting. We're so much a product of our environment as we grow up. Thus, the influence on how you play sport, the sport you play, and also the way in which you play it. So people are like, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And in just a few seconds here, I know John Lashway is going to be able to just fill all kinds of great information. I think just has to click the click the camera on, and we'll be set to go here in just moments. But it is an interesting exercise in how we see ourselves. So my world changes. My father, of course, a longtime coach, educator in Stouffville, Ontario, but recognized really around the province for both things. A learned man, but also someone, a very winning coach. But we go to Eugene, Oregon in 76, 77, and I'm in 8th grade. And from that moment on, I'm molded by the way in which those in Oregon see sport. It's how I saw basketball. It's how track and field is in my blood. It's why, the Canada Games will be coming up, and I'll be watching CBC Gem because I'll be looking at the track times. I'll be looking at the distance. I'll be watching the hurdles. I'll be watching the 4x4. Once it's in you, it doesn't leave. And I think that's also the same of this country. When basketball, at a time when I grew up, the only basketball was, of course, watching with my dad. We had Channel 29, right? So you'd have the rabbit ears, and we'd watch Notre Dame. That's the Digger Phelps years, right? And so I was watching something that nobody else was. It's show and tell. People would go in and talk about their kitty. Mittens found a shoe. I'd go in and say, and then they go from a 2-3. Get along with this. They go to man in the second half, and everyone's like, "What is he? What happened with this family? What's he talking about?" It's the way I grew up, and that's why a guy like John Lashway, who's going to join us, who in many levels has been instrumental in what happens in sport in this country, especially basketball. It's a thrill to have you this morning, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be with you. I think we're kind of kindred spirits.
I think to have someone who's involved in all things Hamilton, and then someone who is an Oregon person and an Oregon Duck. Aside from you and me, I don't know if there's a whole bunch of us.
No, there isn't. And I remember the interview you did with Ryan Schmidt, the Honey Badgers head coach.
Yes, of course.
Years ago, and just some great stories about Oregon basketball and his days with the minor league baseball team in Salem Kaiser, and it brought back a lot of memories for me.
Well, and we can talk about Ryan a little bit. The thing that people need to understand about the CEBL, yes, it is a league that will be a stepping stone. It will be transient at times, where guys are now going to get a chance to go to other leagues, other countries, and maybe even back to the NBA. It's just how it is. But that also works for the coaching and administrators as well, and the administrative and the assistants, as we see Ryan now, I believe, is with the London Lions, if I'm correct.
Yes. Yep.
Now, people will be wondering, John, what are the London Lions?
Well, right now they play in the British Basketball League, which is sort of the CEBL of Great Britain, of England, and he'll be the head coach there during the traditional basketball season and remain as our head coach in Hamilton. One of the many neat things about the CEBL is it fits really nicely into the basketball calendar, and that the leagues in Europe and Asia, they start up usually in September and they finish up in April, May. It's like Ryan was with the Lions this past year in a player development capacity. They were in their league championship game on a Sunday night. He flew into Pearson Airport on Monday morning, and we had the Honey Badgers first team meeting Monday night, leading to the opening of training camp on Tuesday morning. And this year, kind of the same thing. He's got to be in London, England, I think August 16th. And hopefully the Honey Badgers will be in the championship game of the CEBL on August 14th. So he just goes from one thing to the next, just like the players.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. But I do want to go back so people understand your involvement with basketball in this country. And when you go back to really a line in the sand, because until we see a Raptors team, as they said, the only basketball was when the Buffalo Braves would come up and play at Maple Leaf Gardens. So we're talking Bob McAdoo, that era of basketball, and there was a basketball community in Canada, in Toronto. But it wasn't necessarily, you still were talking about the Leafs. You're still talking about Dave Keon. It still was that time. Even Toronto Marlies probably to a degree at that time. But it all changes upon the Raptors coming to Toronto. So people understand, what was your involvement at that time?
So I'd been with the Portland Trailblazers for 9 seasons, and they did a house cleaning, and I was one of the victims of that. And I had a chance to go to the Houston Rockets right away, or this startup team in Toronto, the Raptors. And they didn't have players or coaches yet. And so I spoke with Glenn Grunwald and Isaiah Thomas and John Bitove, and came here to visit for a day, and liked what I saw. And I thought, well, it's expansion. I hadn't done that before. I'd been to the finals. I'd worked many all-star games. There wasn't anything in the NBA I hadn't done except expansion. So I thought, oh, I'll try that. And so we launched this franchise of the Raptors, and anybody under the age of probably 30 wouldn't believe how it was in 1995 when we were getting 8, 9, 10,000 people a game at Skydome, except for the games when Jordan came to town, and on a handful of premier teams. It was pretty quiet in a 50,000 seat baseball stadium in that day. Very different than the Raptors now. And you could drive around Toronto and you wouldn't see basketball hoops anywhere. And it was very different than how us Americans experienced basketball. And as you said at the top of this discussion, sports in general, it was really different. And so our challenge was to change that and to create an impact for basketball, not only in Toronto, but as much of Canada as we could. And of course, we came in the same time the Vancouver Grizzlies did. So we were partners with them in trying to establish NBA basketball in Canada.
So the thing that shifts our universe in terms of understanding basketball and making Canada more of a basketball nation at that point, is it fair to say Vince Carter was that moment?
Yes. I mean, he was probably the biggest factor, but there was a lot of things. The NBA had the 1995 draft at Skydome. I think that helped a lot. There was 25,000 people that showed up for that, and I think it was just a lot of things. You can't always hit the home run like Vince Carter. You have to hit a lot of singles and doubles. And if you tie your star to one player and he moves on, then what do you have? And so we just try to do a lot of the little things, day in, day out, to expose people to the sport. And basketball is a very inclusive sport. And at that time, the market really had the Maple Leafs. The Blue Jays were just coming off their World Series run, and that was fantastic. The Maple Leafs, and I'm not going to slag the Leafs. I was senior vice president of the Maple Leafs for 10 years. I'm very proud of that. But it was very much a closed club. People couldn't get tickets. Frankly, people of color weren't always welcomed. And Toronto's a very diverse market, and it was really changing at that time. And I think basketball really appealed to people who didn't feel welcomed into hockey. And I think that really helped a lot with the Raptors. We were very inviting, and we really reached out to people in a unique way.
Well, I think it certainly culturally has had a very positive impact on our world, where, there wasn't just, look, Canada, as much as we like to think that there was no bias, that there was no racism, that there was no bigotry. Well, I've been around the block long enough to know that I know we like to pride ourselves on that openness, but it still existed. It still was evident in the way in which we lived our lives in Canada, which I think the one thing I'm proud about being Canadian is it's something that we do and have recognized in ourselves, and have tried very hard to make sure that we have an inclusive type culture. And I think we've had some great personalities. And when you talk about, the black athlete coming to Canada, it's funny how that came up on Fox Sports the other day, that there was a comment that it wasn't a place that African Americans want to come to. I can tell you, covering sports in 30 years, that is completely false, incorrect. In fact, not only do I talk to the athletes over all those years, I talk sometimes, because they're so young, talk to the parents. And all you have to do is talk to a Pinball Clemens or his mom, and saying, look, the Rocket, when he came up here, one of the reasons was because of this culture that we have. And basketball has changed our world. It's changed. In fact, when Leo Routens goes to Syracuse, I just lose my mind, because I cannot believe someone from Toronto is going to play for Jim Bayhawk. Like, I just can't get over myself. Yeah, I know he goes to St. Mike's. Everyone hates St. Mike's, but isn't that amazing? Because you're kind of going because he made the team. And now they're being drafted. Canadians in the hundreds are going to Division One schools, or at least Division 1, 2, or 3 schools. They're being drafted at the top of the class. They're the stars of those teams. And so now we get to this point, which is sort of, if the Raptors were the first line in the sand, I have to think that the CEBL, quite frankly, is the second significant line in the sand for basketball in this country.
Oh, I definitely think so as well. There's about 400 Canadians that play professional men's basketball around the world. And when I came to Canada in 1995, there was 2 players in the NBA, Rick Fox and Bill Wennington. And, at times we've had, I don't know how many there is today, 17, I could be wrong, but at times we've had, I think 20, 21. Canada's the number 2 producer of professional basketball talent in the world. And a lot of Canadians don't know that. And so it's part of the challenge of the CEBL to educate, as well as create opportunities for these players to develop their game so they can reach their next level, whether that's the NBA or, a top league in Europe or a second tier league overseas, whatever their level is. We just want to do what we can to help get, people there. As you said earlier, it's a coach or a front office person, a referee, as well as a player. So that's where the CEBL fits in.
It's a chance where if you go to school in high school in Guelph, the Niagara region, you go to school in Hamilton. I mean, either you took that long shot of, the way that things are seen, where you try to, probably a prep school is probably in that conversation. You hope to land, at a big enough place. Maybe you go play for Coach Cal one day, which we do have kids who have done that, and then they move on. And this has changed that. That's where I think there's a significant change in the fact that now you can look in your own backyard and play professional basketball where you played high school. That was just simply fantasy land talk not that long ago. And that, to me, at the same time as soccer in this country, has literally done the same thing, where we see Canadian athletes playing for Bayern Munich or in their Premiership or La Liga. Like it is so global now that I think, and this is where people sometimes, because I've done sports radio for a long time, that they assume that I always want to talk about sports, that it is this great thing. But I grew up as I said, with a father who's a great coach, but a great educator. And they do go to the same. And if we're around a great coach, there is no difference between saying he's a coach and saying he's a teacher. And that the significance of what you learn by being on a team, by participating and having that kind of mentorship, which is what the CEBL does. And that's why I think Mike Morelli is the perfect commissioner for this. I've known Michele for a long time. And I'm like, it all has worked. And I mean, and talking about the golden age of basketball, and, Javon Shepard's a great reflection of that. We're at the beginning of it. This isn't the end. This is the start of the golden age of basketball, and it's only going to get bigger as far as I can see, John.
Yeah, that's really right. And part of my role that I bring to this is that perspective that, if we get 2,000 people at a game, it is what it is. That's the start. Again, there was a lot of nights that I was at the Raptors game and we had 8,000 people there, and that includes the thousand tickets we gave away to community programs. So, we just have to be patient, and you do the right things every day, and it does grow over time. And Mike Morelli has no fear of failure, and that's how we were with the Raptors. There was never any doubt in our mind. There was a lot of doubt in other people's minds. There's people that told me, you guys aren't going to be here long term, and you just let that go in one ear and out the other. But Mike Morelli I agree. He's an amazing commissioner. I wouldn't be involved in this. Like, at my stage in my career, I don't need to be doing this, but I'm very passionate about it, and I love it. And a big part of that is I get to work with people like Mike and Josh Canuster in the league office, and these young executives that are all young enough to be my kids, and some cases grandkids. They're so hardworking, and they're so passionate and dedicated to this movement of developing basketball and developing people. It's, as you said, it's not just about putting a ball in a basket. It's helping people build character and aspire to something, and to gain all the benefits that come from being on a high level team and a well structured team.
That's so well said. It's why getting to know guys like Jason Tom, as I have over the last couple of years, when he comes on the show, we talk about basketball, but it's the human side of things that Jason has, the things that you talk about when, as I said, sure, there's a hard side of always an elite athlete. When you start talking about prep schools, and whether you want to, get into Kentucky, you're smart enough to go to Duke or whatever those things, where the end result is pro basketball. But you know, if you're talking about the NBA, we're talking about 2% chance for anybody, including guys in those schools. So there's a lot of other things. There's a lot of other life stuff that goes on that makes communities better. And Hamilton is better for having the Honey Badgers in it. They're a community that it's a blue collar community, but it's one that has a lot of heart. I mean, it's you know, my mom's from there. My dad went to Mac, so did my brother, and of course we grew up Ticats fans. So to me, there's always a lot of heart in Hamilton, and the more positive things they can have in their life, the better the community is, because it's reflected in their mood, how they go when they go to games. And to me, the Honey Badgers is a natural for them.
Yeah, thank you. And we really try to be a great community partner. Our season's 3 months a year. It's May through August. And so the other 9 months, we really focus on being a good community partner, because, you know, if we go into a school or we get involved in a program, a lot of times that motivates other people to get involved in that community program. Or, you know, a message coming from a player to a group of kids, those kids hear that, even though, you know, mom or dad might say that, or somebody else might say that to them. If it comes out of the mouth of a pro athlete, it usually carries a little bit more weight. So we really prioritize being a community partner. And in this league, community outreach is a big part of what this league is about. And I feel that anybody that wants to be involved in basketball should be able to find their niche. You know, it's not just players. It's a fan, it's a sponsor, it's a volunteer. You know, anybody. It's the one sport, honestly, that I think is the most open and inviting and welcoming to people. And that's a real priority for the CEBL.
Well, it's got up to what I think is a great start, but it is the start. It is the infancy of what we will understand as grassroots and the chance to play pro basketball. But before I let you go, I do want to leave you with the kind of story that I'm sure you'll relate to. Sometimes it gets lost when I tell it, but so in 76, 77, and so my dad takes a sabbatical, so I'm playing all the sports, and of course, being a Canadian, they're looking at me sideways. I had a hockey jacket on. They weren't really sure what kind of athlete I was. And I had just come from winning a provincial championship in hockey, but I played every sport. So this was a candy store for me. And so I go down there, and at one point I do what everyone does in Oregon. You start running long distance, which really was my thing. I was a middle distance guy. I was a 400 guy, right? So long triple 400, that's what I did. So we're on Pre's Trail, because I didn't live really that far from it, right? So there's my dad, the coach. And I've got on these ridiculous Adidas sweatpants on that kind of almost came up to the knees. They look like knickers. It was so dumb. But I
think you passed me on the trail. Yeah. I remember you.
Well, I can tell you did, because I had out my hockey jersey on. So there's this little Latino guy coming down that beautiful, you know, the bark in the tree, and he's coming down. My dad, as he's coming closer, goes, "Do you mind if my son runs with you?" And he said, "Okay, if he can keep up." And as he goes by me, it's Alberto Salazar.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yep.
Just so you know, I didn't keep up.
What school did you go to?
I was at James Monroe Junior High.
Oh, okay.
I was in 8th grade.
I was at Cole and Kelly.
Now in 76, 77, where would you have been? Like
Cole and Kelly.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Cole and Kelly. So we probably played each other in baseball or something.
Well, see, that's the only thing I was allowed to, because they wouldn't let me allow me to participate in basketball. They said, you'll never be able to play. And I'm like, why? You're Canadian. Oh, and that's really how it was, until we got the chance to play in phys ed, in the actual class. So I started playing in the city league, and believe it or not, because I was kind of this size in 8th grade, just one of those guys that got to 5'8" and just never got bigger. So in the city league, people laughed and said, "What position do you play in the city league?" Center. You played center. I said, "Well, you know, when you're 8th grade, so it's a city league," and I was, let's just say, a aggressive athlete. So when we played at phys ed class, I played with that chip on my shoulder. There's a reason why Doug Flutie's like my favorite athlete. It's like, make everybody pay. And they're sitting there going, God, he's really good. Why isn't he on the team? The phys ed head was an ex-Marine drill sergeant named Roy Bass. And he went out of his way to make sure he said my name wrong the whole year, just how he was, just tough guy. But when I came, well, basically, I almost won the city championship in the 400. I was like 0.2 of a second against the guy who was like the top football player at Jefferson. He was a receiver. And the Sheldon head coach came to see me. It's the first time Mr. Bass, Roy Bass, said my name right. And there comes, well, of course, we know Justin Herbert and everyone else who came from, my brother went to Sheldon, and he said, son, would you like to come play football for me? I just saw what you did. You like football? Well, of course, I would die. But I was going back. It was only a year sabbatical. I had to go back to Canada. Now, I'm not going to say I cried the moment that happened, but it was like the greatest thing that ever came out of someone's mouth, and I couldn't stay. I said I would have killed to play football at Sheldon. But that was during the Danny Ainge era, right? I saw him play football. He played on both sides of the ball, played baseball. I mean, as a North Eugene Highlander, people don't understand. He literally was kind of like a god. He was on the front page of the Eugene Register, whatever that
Register Guard,
Register Guard. He was in the front page. A high school student.
I was 2 years behind Danny at North, and then he played on my team at the Portland Trailblazers.
Of course. I was a Trailblazer fan. Of course, a typical guy's like, what do you mean Bill Walton doesn't eat meat? What's he doing out there? John, I've been waiting a long time to talk to you. And hopefully I'll see you again. I want to get out to some games as well this summer. And if I can get to championship weekend, I think you're probably going to be there, but I promised Javon Shepard that I want a full star treatment when I go to that weekend. And he said, well, of course, that usually means a seat and a towel. So
we'll take great care of you.
John, thanks so much. Just been wonderful here this morning. That is John Lashway joining us here this morning on Raw Mike Richards. Just a fabulous time, as I knew it would be, and just so instrumental on where we sit right now, not only with basketball, but sport in this country. Just so thrilled he could join us here this morning. It is 8:31, so not even close to the fives. Of all the times that I've not been close, this has been by far the worst one. But you know what? Traffic's still going. Brendan's still going to tell you. We'll still come back. There's still more fun. We'll still talk some CPL. Again, in a couple minutes here. First, here's Brendan.